All right, guys, sorry for not being there today, but we are going to take a look at your hook statements for the ACT Aspire. So coming up in April is going to be the ACT Aspire state test. This is the new test that's replacing like AZ Merit, AZ M2, all of those things. So we are going to start by just looking at hook sentences, ways to capture the reader's attention and to make sure that they are engaged in what you're talking about. So when you take the ACT Aspire, you're going to get a topic. The topic is typically going to address an issue that you will need to analyze and explain, but not necessarily that you need to argue or persuade. So we're going to look at these different strategies for hooking your reader, and then you guys are going to do some examples on your own. So strategy number one is to create a strong statement. Now, on your green paper that you picked up from the back, you will see that strong statements is the first one. And something to note about strong statements is they usually use superlatives. And they usually will use extremes. So if we take a look at the example here, we have cell phones are the greatest. So a superlative, again, are those words that use the EST to take it to the highest level. So are the greatest technological achievement in history. So in history being the extreme here. So if you will just add that on there, underlining greatest, maybe circling in history, so you can see that they've like added these different things into their strong statement. The next thing we want to do is looking at that example, cell phones are the greatest technological achievement in history. We want to figure out what is the actual topic of this essay based on just their hook sentence. So down here underneath topic, you can list out some different things. The obvious one being cell phones. That could potentially be the topic of this essay. Another topic that might be prevalent in this essay could be technological achievements, things like that. So those are some of the different topics that we might be looking at here in this example. Now, the next strategy that gets used in hook sentences are a surprise with a misconception. So first we need to think of what is a misconception. A misconception is common knowledge that may be incorrect. So let's look at our example. Most coffee addicts would tell you their favorite drink comes from a bean, but they are wrong. So if you are looking at that going, but it's called a coffee bean, Miss Lake, what are you talking about? You're actually looking at the seed of the cascara fruit. It's not actually a bean. So that's what they're talking about here is most people would tell you coffee is a bean. It's a coffee bean, but that common knowledge is incorrect. So they're bringing us in by giving us this information we think we know and then tricking us. They're flipping that knowledge on its head. Make sure you know that this is common knowledge that may be incorrect and that they are flipping information we think we know. All right, and then again, some potential topics here could be coffee, could be other surprise foods. So maybe the rest of their stuff is going to be talking about like the cashew nut. That's not actually a nut, or sweetbreads, which is not bread, it is intestines. So maybe it's coffee, maybe it's just surprise foods in general. All right, the next one is the two-sentence scenario. This one I would like you to note is a little bit risky to use. The reason why it's risky is it often pushes you into second person point of view. And if we know anything about formal academic writing, it's that we often want to stay in third person. So here is our two-sentence scenario. Imagine being cut off from everyone around you, you being a second person pronoun. You have no way to get help. But then I want you to think, what is the potential topic of this essay? If they are starting an informative essay and they're saying, imagine being cut off from everyone around you, you have no way to get help, what could the topics be? You and a partner at your table can come up with some different topics that might be related to this hook sentence. Now, this next one is description. And what they do in description that is really important is they use lots of imagery and sensory details, things to really engage the reader. So this is the example they've given. The rich aroma fills the kitchen as his mouth waters, thinking of the first hot sip of coffee. So again, come up with some different examples of what this topic might be about. We have these different sensory details like rich aroma, that his mouth is watering, things like that. And our final one is simile or metaphor. So looking at similes and metaphors, these are obviously comparisons. So we have Snapchat is a magnet. That's the comparison we have going on. So Snapchat is a magnet pulling teens away from social interaction. So what is the topic going to be for this essay? So this is what you're going to be doing first on your green sheet, is going through, looking at the different examples and coming up with the topics that you think are being shown in those hook sentences. Step 2 is where you're going to come over to Canvas. And if you look underneath Tuesday, you'll see this ACT Aspire prompt. This is one example of what an ACT Aspire prompt looks like. Now, the tricky thing, it's kind of nice, kind of tricky, is that with ACT prompts, you don't have any sort of articles or information to go off of. You just have the question. So here's the question. Standardized tests like the ACT or SAT are used by colleges and universities as a method to compare students against the same standards, but many people suggest post-secondary institutions put too much emphasis on test scores when considering student acceptance. Write an essay in which you explain both the value and challenge of colleges using test scores to make enrollment decisions and discuss how it positively and negatively impacts college-bound students. Be sure to support your analysis with reasons and examples. You're not writing this essay, but I do want you to come up with hook statements for this essay. So we know the topic is going to be ACT and SAT test scores. We know it's going to be talking about the level of importance and emphasis on those test scores, how it's going to impact students, how it's going to impact colleges, positive, negatives, things like that. So you are going to then take your hook statement sheet and you are going to come up with a strong statement that could be a hook for that prompt. Then you are going to create a hook statement that's a surprise with a misconception and write a hook statement for that prompt using that technique. Then you're going to do a 2-sentence scenario hook and base it on that prompt. Same thing for description. And then finally for simile or metaphor. So you are going to do this all on your green sheet. You're going to keep your green sheet until tomorrow. Tomorrow we will look at it together and kind of go over your different hooks, see which ones are really strong, which ones were easier for the different essay types, things like that. And then we'll start looking at breaking down the prompt a little further, coming up with examples, things along those lines. I will be back tomorrow. Don't worry. I'm not having a baby. Just have to go to babysit my own son because his grandma is sick today. So she had to go home. So don't worry. I'll be back. No baby yet. But get your topics done in that second column. And then in the third column, write your hook statements. Don't turn these in. Keep them till tomorrow. If you have questions, reach out on Remind. I'll be available to try to answer those as quickly as I can. Thank you guys for being good for this